Hello again guys, welcome back to another Big Out Devlin video, and today we're going to have another discussion video on paganism, looking specifically at the aspect of the Hamr, which is a particular part of the pagan soul, if you wish, or the sense of self to be more specific. I've done a video already on the pagan sense of self, defining and discussing some of the qualities and the characteristics that combine to create essentially the pagan soul, or the pagan sense of self. But I do have another part, if not two more parts of that video to complete. But that is a very heavy video. We talk about a lot of complex subject matters and we go in great detail. And so what I wanted to do was actually to look at least the most important parts of the pagan sense of self in separate videos for quick and easy reference and for clarification, I suppose. And so this particular video is going to be looking at the Hamr as an aspect of the pagan sense of self. Now, the Hamr is a malleable form. It is something that is not set. It is, in its sense, spiritual in nature. It has a pure spiritual quality to it, but it can interact and influence the physical also. This is really one of my favourite aspects of the pagan sense of self, because it really does start to blur very successfully the borders that are conceptualized at an individual level, the borders that exist between the physical and spiritual, and show actually there are no borders. They interact fully. They are the same, just the same thing in different forms. And once you begin to understand this concept, this principality, if you wish, of paganism, this is when you can truly have unique experiences and really begin to expand your knowledge and understanding and your level of consciousness. It helps dissolve away the boundaries between self and other, and we have seen that previously in the runes. The runes describe that part of our learning process is to dissolve these boundaries, and I believe that understanding the Hamr is a key part of dissolving those boundaries. Now, I've gone off on a wee bit of a tangent like I normally do there, talking about related subjects that do interact very much with what we're talking about here, but let's try and be focused, okay? So let's look at the Hamr and specifically what it is. Let's try and give it a definition to start off with and use that as a framework to move on to more complicated aspects. The Hamr, as I say, is a malleable, spiritual part of the pagan sense of self. In many ways, it's, if you were to look at it from a more modern perspective, Abrahamic sort of perspective, it is the soul. It is what most people would recognize as the soul. But I want to get away from that, because in paganism, we don't have a soul. Okay, not in the way that Christians, for example, would see it. There is no soul. This is just another part of our overall self and form that together form essentially what would be a soul. Okay, but it is what most people would recognize, because it is our spiritual form, if you wish, given personification. It is our physical manifestation made spiritual. It is the analog then at that point to our leek, our bodies. Okay, leek is just an old word for the body. Okay, and so when we first begin to experience, if you wish, the spiritual world, when people astral project, even if they're not pagan, when they astral project, when they go into trance, if they are pagan, we'd call it a trance, of course. When we experience the spiritual world, our Hamr is in appearance as we are within this physical world. This is its first initial appearance. As I say, it is malleable. It is subject to change according to certain influences that are put upon it. But initially, it will almost always, if not always, be you as an individual, as you look yourself in the mirror. And so it literally is a spiritual manifestation of you and your physical qualities, but it's actually a lot more than this. The Hamr is not physical, it is spiritual. As I say, it is malleable as a result, and it is malleable according to your Hugla, okay, and other aspects of your consciousness, but primarily the Hugla, which is the mind, that is your conscious thought, your personality, your persona, if you wish. It is also malleable, subject to your Madi and your Mini. Your Madi being your mood, your emotions, your feelings, although to a lesser degree that does influence your Hamr, as I say, and of course, as I say, your Mini, your memory, your ancestral memory also, which does actually can have a major influence, because the Mini, your ancestral memory, can manifest itself as another part of yourself, as an extension of your soul, if you wish, in the form of your kin filja. We'll get to that at another point. But normally, always, your spiritual form, as I say, is a representation of you as a person, how you see yourself. But when your awareness has grown to some degree, when you are beginning to, as I mentioned before, dissolve the boundaries between self and other, you begin not to see yourself truly as an individual, as an isolated pocket of life, if you wish, isolated from all the other pockets of or forms of life that are out there, you know, the plants, the animals, other people. Really, when you dissolve those boundaries, you see we're all just life. That is it. Life in slightly different forms, but life nonetheless. And, you know, we represent this with the concept of Hond, which is spelled O-N-D. Hond is life, essentially pure life, the life force, and it is given out from our cells through breath, and it is taken in also. And so we share our life force with all that which is around us through our breath, and we take in the life force and share the life forces of everything around us also, again, through our breath. This is what nurtures our very soul, our spirit, if you wish, within paganism. And without this, our Hamr, in fact, very specifically, which is the framework for our spiritual consciousness, would dissolve. It would not sustain. It wouldn't be sustained anymore. We need the Hond. And whilst we're on it, to save me forgetting, Hond is something that is, as I say, is something that's exchanged between all forms of life. And really, there is no exchange. We are all life, so there is no boundary, and that's really where you're trying to get to. The point in your mind, your awareness, where you realise, and not only realise but understand, that there are no boundaries between you and everything else. There is no self, there is no other, but that the greatest way to raise others is to raise yourself, because you're all part of the same life anyway. The Hond that is shared between us, or exchanged between us on a temporary level, is something that you can use to, again, change your Hamr. You can experience the Hond of another living being, okay, or another life form. You can experience the Hond of a tree, for example, where you feel its roots in the tree, within the soil, anchoring it down against the strongest of winds. You can feel the water it takes from the soil to sustain itself. You can feel the water flowing through not your veins, but the aspect of the tree that allows water to travel, and it feels almost like your veins. Your body extends out. This is your Hamr, yes? Your Hamr changes form, so your arms extend out as branches that then become twigs and, all the rest of it, basically. And you really truly feel the force, or the how it is to be that tree. And the same happens with animals, and you, to an extent, I suppose, you could try to experience what it's like to live as someone else also, although this is something I have never indulged in, and don't know of anyone who does. I don't know if taking on the form of another human is something perhaps advisable or desirable, I suppose. But what it can most definitely be done is to experience the form of another animal or life form that is different to yourself. Okay, now this, as I said, is done by experiencing their Hamr. You need to make a connection with that living being, and this shows just how malleable your Hamr can actually be. But this does take a very powerful hukra. It takes a very powerful mind and a very powerful overall consciousness and a state of yada. Okay, as we go through life, we experience life, we extend our level of yada, which is a sort of aspect of our learning, essentially our spiritual learning, and raises our consciousness as a subsequent consequence to that. As our yada rises, our understanding of the world and that which is around us arises, and so thus then we can experience their Hamr by essentially putting ourselves in their shoes, but on a spiritual level, and then, as I say, extending that into our Hamr to create a different spiritual form for our consciousness to exist in when it's within the spiritual level of existence. Now, as I say, I wanted to talk about what we're on that subject, but as I said, the Hamr to start off with, on its most simplest form, will be you on what you should see in the mirror. However, its true representation, the true form of your Hamr, its natural form, is you on a truest level. It represents not only your physical characteristics, and it does represent your physical characteristics, of course, the leek, the body. Your physical characteristics are a part of your soul within paganism, part of your sense of self, but they also, the Hamr also represents your persona. Also, it represents your spiritual and mental characteristics also. And so if you are brave, for example, and fierce and strong of body and mind and you may actually find yourself not actually over time, as your awareness become and awareness of yourself raises to the point where you are truthful with yourself about who you and what you are, you may see yourself, for example, as a bear. For example, an animal that really has all of those qualities I just mentioned. And so this is where we see that the Hamr for a lot of pagans is very zoomorphic in nature. It is based upon more animal than human. However, this is taking on an animal, for example, that is not directly linked to you. It is possible to do this even without experiencing the Hamr of another animal. If it's a part of your characteristics, it's easy to extend yourself into that. But there is a part, again, of yourself that is really more of an extension of your pagan sense of self, an extension of your soul, so to speak. So it's not a direct part of you, but it's heavily linked and tied into you and separates from you on death, and that is your filger. Your filger is essentially your animal companion, your totem animal, if you wish. The animal, this filger, is a direct representation of your characteristics as an individual. It is you purely without your physical characteristics, you as your persona, truly displayed on a spiritual level in zoomorphic form. And this again is a very common place to find your Hamr set within. When you go into trance, for example, you may immediately enter your trance as your human form, but at will can transform into the animal that is your filger. Okay, and again, this takes a certain level of awareness and state of yada. Okay, and this animal will be totally unique to you. There will be others who are the same animal as you, but it's a true representation, is what I mean, of yourself. And you don't have a choice in it. You are what you are. And that is why I say you really have to be at the state of true honesty with yourself, true understanding of yourself, to start to really see your filger and have experiences with your filger. There is again another extension of the filger which I mentioned earlier called the kin filger. The kin filger is the filger associated with your family, with your ancestors, and this can be a completely different animal to that of your own filger. The kin filger represents what your bloodline, in essence, what your ancestors represent in their entirety. Okay, again, it's pretty much set. It's like almost like a genetic inheritance, but on a spiritual level. Your kin filger will be a representative of whatever your family truly is. And we see this actually within history. A lot of pagan names, for example, are either heavily associated or directly translate into an animal. And there's no real sort of points for guessing that that animal would, of course, would have been the kin filger of that family group. Now, you can also manipulate your Hamr, okay, into different forms on an easier enough level when you are part of like almost a group. Okay, now there are cults that have existed during the time of paganism, such as the bear cult called the Berserkers, or the Berserkier, I think it's the old term for it. Now the Berserkers, we all know what they are. They're people who fought in the battlefield with the ferocity of the bear. Okay, and if you believe the myths and the stories within paganism, they literally transformed into the bear that they associated themselves with. But whether they did this on a true shape-shifting level where their physical form would change to the point where they literally became bears, well, that's down to you and your personal beliefs. But certainly one thing you can do is you can use your, as I mentioned earlier, your Hamr lives or exists within the spiritual level. It is a spiritual thing in essence. It is the framework for your spiritual consciousness. But it interacts at a physical level, and this is how it can do so. As you become more familiar with your Hamr, as your Hugre, your Modi and your Mini develop, you can use that to, as I say, your Hugre, as I've given many examples already, can be used to shape your Hamr into another form, typically a zoomorphic, animalistic form. But that is purely normally on the spiritual level. Instead, you can actually, in essence, let the filger, in this case your totem filger, which is in essence a very similar concept to the kin filger, but it is more for a group that you are associated with and have dedicated yourself to. In this case, the bear for the Berserkers. Your totem filger you can actually allow to, instead of letting it influence you on a spiritual level to change your Hamr on a spiritual level, you let it almost possess you, for want of a better word, and change your Hamr on the physical level. Now, this is important to understand. The Hamr exists within our leek, our bodies. It is a spiritual framework, but it is almost like a second skin. It exists within our physical bodies. That is where it spends most time. It exists on the spiritual plane, but it exists and experiences the physical world through our physical bodies. Now, itself, it is an analog to the physical body, and so it lets the spiritual consciousness of ourselves experience the spiritual world. Yes, this is correct. It gives us senses and movement, essentially, within the spiritual world, either as an animal or as a human being, or more abstract forms, as I've discussed. But it can be reversed, as I say, influence, so that the Hamr interacts with the physical framework of our leek, of our bodies, and can influence it with the qualities of the Hamr itself. So we can essentially project our true selves from our Hamr into our physical bodies, and taking the qualities that are within us to our without. Now, this, for example, is seen when as we get older, we tend to become more frail and weaker. And if our natural temperament of our, of our mind and our spirit, so to speak, is that of a fierce, strong, physical individual, the Hamr can display that and interact with our bodies to prevent age truly taking an effect on the body. Yes, you will age, but you won't have the curse of age, which is, as I say, the fragility and all the rest of it. It can help keep your body strong and youthful in function. And this is essentially what the Berserkers would have done. They would have allowed a reverse influence of the Hamr upon the physical body, but where the totem animal is allowed to fully come in and take over not only the physical body, but strengthening the body. Anyone can do this. If you've had an experience with a bear, for example, and you've interacted with its hum to a point where you understand that animal and can incorporate its features into yourself, then fantastic. If it happens to be your field jet, again, this will be something quite easily done, and you can use it to strengthen your body to give you for the ferocity of the bear and take on certain aspects of it. But the Berserkers go that next stage and let not only their body be influenced by the field jet, they let their mind and their body literally become possessed, to be completely taken control of by the totem animal. And this is when, in theory, their shapeshift is complete. Whether it changes, the physical body or not, doesn't really matter. But on a spiritual level, those who have a powerful enough hugda and experience with the spiritual world, so to the point where they can see the spirit world within the physical world, which is something very much documented within paganism, they would actually see the transformation of the Hamr of the berserker on the physical plane change to that of the bear itself, not take on its characteristics, but completely become a bear. And this is where the shape-shifting concept truly comes from. It's the shape-shifting of the Hamr to the point where it has significant effect on the way that you act and the limitations of your actions on the physical world. Now, one of the issues about letting full possession, which is something you can't just do, you can't just go, I'm going to allow myself to be like that. You have to dedicate yourself to a certain way of life, become disciplined, become so infused with your totem animal or your filger that this is very hard to do. You have to dedicate yourself to trying to achieve this shape-shifting aspect, so to speak. But if you do manage it, you can completely become the animal in question. And as I say, that is the true shape-shifting of paganism, and heavily linked in with the Hamr. As I say, the Hamr is what gives the shape-shifting element that we're talking about. Now, as I say, you can do this to a certain extent with the other part, with any animal, any plant that you come across. But as I say, what the Hamr truly is there for, its function, if you wish, as I say, is the spiritual, as a spiritual framework for your consciousness. So your hugla, your madi, and your mini, your mind, your memory, and your mood can freely travel within the spiritual realm by attaching or detaching themselves from your physical form and attaching themselves to your spiritual framework, the Hamr itself. And so when in trance or when astral projecting, so on and so forth, you are able to do so, to travel the spiritual world within the framework that is the Hamr itself. Now, I believe I've probably covered most of what there is to be said about the Hamr there. There is a greater, sense of detail that you can go into, as I say, how it interacts with other things and that. But I think for this video, we've got to 20 minutes, so it's long enough anyway, this video. It's supposed to be a short assumption of everything. I think it's a good guide as to what the Hamr is. I will do these short-ish videos, guys, on what the pagan sense of self is for you, so you can look at certain specific forms of the pagan sense of self in specific videos. And I will endeavour, guys, I am trying to do it, the second and possibly third parts of the full assumption of the pagan sense of self that I've already started. I've done the first video on. Now, the reason I haven't started it yet is because the first video is an hour long, and I have to go through all that to remind myself of what I've already spoken about and what needs to still be covered. So I am working my best on it, guys, and I will do that as soon as I find the time to find an hour to go through everything and rewrite notes for the second video. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening. I will see you soon, and thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.